Are you an ambitious leader ready to break through limiting beliefs, align with your purpose, and thrive in your career without sacrificing your well being or postponing your true desires? I'm Diana Ordonez, certified high performance coach and your host. Each week, we'll dive into actionable insights and research based strategies to help you unlock clarity, build unshakable confidence, and take courageous action toward a life of impact and fulfillment. If you're ready to overcome fear, embrace growth, and step boldly into your next level, you're in the right place. Let's create a life filled with courage and purpose together. Hello, welcome back, everybody. I am joined by Katherine Krupka today, and it's awesome to have her on because it's just been incredible to get to know Katherine. I actually met Katherine on a CHPC, and for those that don't know, it's Certified High Performance Coaching recertification, and you attend every year to kind of get refreshed on the program and get some hands-on experience. And as you know, the world would have it, we actually both recently had moved to North Carolina. And it happened that I signed up to ask Brendan Burchard a question on the Q&A. And I got the chance to tell Brendan my story and how CHPC changed my life at a time that I really needed it to, because I had just lost Juan, and it was just such an emotional moment for me, and people felt really connected. And Katherine happened to reach out to me after that session, and it turned out that then, even more bizarre, we ended up in the same practice coaching room, right? And I got a chance to experience coaching with you in that room. And then we had connected, during some Zoom meetings, and then we've just become great friends since. And it's just an awesome way of connecting, and someone that is like-minded. But also, as we got to know each other, we got to know more about how we connect with our higher power, and how we are able to go from being this go-getter person that's high achieving and wants to achieve big goals, to also being connected to our inner knowing and spiritually that way. Because I really did feel led to reach out to you, just like you felt really compelled to reach out to me. And it's just been awesome to have I know we're not even that close, but proximity for 2 hours from each other. We're finally going to get to meet in person when I go do my half marathon in Cary. So it's just been awesome. And I'm excited to introduce, the audience to you, because you have such a powerful story. It's just like an adventurous story about following your path to discovering your purpose, to just stepping into your power. You talk a lot about how you were really led to have that confidence, right? Because, and I'll let you talk more about that, but Katherine Krupka, she's a certified high performance coach. She's an executive coach. She comes from a background in holistic healing and health. And so as in your previous life as an international business consultant and working in diplomacy, tell us what that means, what that's like, and how that being so different from what you do now, how you got from one to the other place, and just let's dig in.
Yeah, awesome. I'd also, it's fun to hear you recall how we connected, because it really was very meaningful for me as well. And I so enjoy all the levels on which we're able to share and connect and communicate and learn from one another. It's great fun, and it's great to join your audience here as well. So thank you very much. Um, yeah, I think a lot of us who are in a field of helping, which my holistic healing work is, and even really my coaching is, and I think a lot of us come to it from our own need, our own path of growth. And for me, I spent many years, really kind of a whole career, in international business consulting, and initially in diplomacy. And It was amazing. I was in some incredible parts of the world at incredible times. Um, uh, watched the disintegration of the Soviet Union and the building of the Russian Federation and the independent states around it. Firsthand while it was happening, it was an extraordinary experience. Very high adrenaline, kind of the whole time. And I was young enough that that was really cool and really fun until it wasn't, right? And then the body ultimately kind of gives out, though, really, I would say, since it's us having this conversation, my spirit also gave out. And it was too much. It was too much. There was a lot of darkness at that time. There was a lot of corruption, a lot of violence, a lot of challenged just in a number of ways in the market, in the field in which I was working, and pretty in my pretty close environs as well, we'll say. And it wore me down, and I hit a point where uh, I heard a phrase recently. I was looking for an exit ramp, and I truly was. I was deeply depressed, though no one knew, right? I was, super high performing. I was running this company. We were the first and biggest of our kind in the market. We're super successful, et cetera, right? Kind of a classic story. And inside, I was empty, really, truly empty. Um, and when I was able to come back to the States, I was led through a book that a friend had given me, to a healing center in Arizona and went out there, and, changed everything. It was all like, raw foods and, health and, combating depression and all these things. I was like, okay, this makes sense. Let's do this. But what I didn't know is, it was also very much based on a spiritual foundation, right?
Mm.
We meditated, we were doing yoga, we were in nature, we were on really, truly sacred Native American land. And it was an extraordinary experience and really started changing me from the inside, and
Hmm.
raised all sorts of questions and all sorts of awareness that up until this point I hadn't had.
Mm.
And so studying with and from the person who leads it, who was both a holistic medical doctor and very spiritually adept, let's say, in his own right and on his own path. I left and I was like, I'm going to become a naturopath. I want to study these things, and really, truly, I knew, right, deep inside that this is where I was meant to go, though nothing in my external life would have given any indication of that. I had grown up in a religious tradition that I had uh, abandoned, and rejected at that time, and none of that made any sense to me. It didn't, fit with my linear, logical, here's how things go, materialist sort of perspective. So as I began my studies in natural healing, it really became clear that there's so much more at play.
Yeah.
And the more I meditated, the more you just realize there's more available, right?
Mm.
And it's almost like our camera lens of our life or our mind or our heart is, set to this when really so much more is available. We just aren't attuned to it. We aren't focused on it, maybe to keep that sort of camera image. And so that's how it happened.
That's awesome. There's so much I want to dig into because I know you kind of brushed over it, but let's paint that picture, right? What does it look like to be in the Soviet Union, trying to like reform the way that they do, you know, all things finance, all things business, what does that look like? And when you talk about your whole nervous system, your spirit, everything gave out, like, what did your day look like? What were the real fears like? What did that, look like to be involved in that? And you talk about high adrenaline, right? So Paint that picture for
Yeah.
us.
So I was there in that region for 10 years. Um, and at the beginning, it was kind of happy adrenaline. Wow, everything is so exciting. Wow, everything is new. Wow, everything is possible. Wow, what can't be done. And there was a really strong feeling. I was on a team for a while where we were promoting provincial and municipal level privatization in different cities and regions around the country. So it was very entrepreneurial would be one word I would definitely apply for it. This had never been done before on this scale, not even close. And different organizations had different ideas of what it might look like or how it might be done. And while privatization on the federal level was legally mandated. The Federation had decided to do that. At the municipal and provincial level, it was voluntary at that time. So we were
Mm.
literally going out to governors and to mayors around the country and pitching our idea. We were selling this concept of privatizing, trucking fleets, retail stores, dry cleaners, groceries, these types of things.
Yeah. So at a
And
time where like, how long was this country, right? Think about how
so
long
this
were
would have
people
been,
operating in this way under communism, just kind of that was their reality. Everything was government owned, and the idea of owning your own business and just it was just like so foreign, right? At that point.
it was terribly foreign and it had been demonized, right, during the whole Soviet period. So for, 70 odd years, capitalism is bad, these are, bad
Right,
people, bad ideas. It leads to all these terrible things.
right.
So people have been deeply ingrained in that way of thinking. So we were going out and, working with the government leaders, but then in another position I had, one of our jobs was to I don't know, I don't even like that word, but to provide new information to educate, right, the population with ideas that in fact this is a fine thing and that indeed your ability to participate in the economic activity around you, whether you're, putting your voucher into a new oil company or bank or something like that on a grand scale, or whether you're getting together with your neighbors to invest in a grocery, that this level of self-determination, that this level of private engagement is in fact good, that this is beneficial for you, that this helps you and your neighbors to be more prosperous or to, achieve more or, do whatever you might want or provide better for your kids, et cetera, et cetera. And that was a real, it was an endeavor. And we used all kinds of methods. I remember in one region where I was working, we created cartoons. And so we had like these little, like animated drawings and things like this that would be these posters that would go up around the city. We used all sorts of creative methods to approach people in different ways, right? We would use television news, we would use drama programs, we used all these sorts of things to help convey these ideas.
Well, what I thought about when you said that is part of the CHPC framework is around influence, right? And it's
Yeah.
influencing their thinking. And so tell me what helped you be able to influence people on such a large scale in a big way to, like you said, it seemed like anything was possible at that time. Like we're
Yeah.
changing this whole country and in some ways changing the world,
The
right? To
world.
for watch people
Absolutely.
were watching.
Yeah. I think that's a great question. I think a lot of the sense of influence partly came from we were almost all of us working on this on the ground there were pretty young. I at the time would have been when I started in the privatization work, I would have been 27, 26, quite young, right? So I think part of it was just this sense like anything can happen, right? There is that sort of youthful perspective. Um, I forget who it was. I just heard recently. It might have been. Alfred Hitchcock, some filmmaker who said it wasn't Alfred Hitchcock, it was somebody else who said, I didn't know it couldn't be done, right? No one,
Right.
I wasn't old enough to know that it couldn't be done.
Yeah, like nobody
And
told you it couldn't be done.
we didn't know it couldn't, therefore it could, right? I mean, so there
Right.
was a lot of that going on. And then I think
Possibility
there
thinking.
a lot of, I mean, wide open, right? Because we didn't know any better, right? We didn't know that that wasn't possible. We didn't know it could. I didn't know that as, a young American woman, which this was a country where women weren't uh, involved in things like this, right? And not taken nearly as seriously as men were, that I couldn't walk into a governor's office and make this kind of a presentation and that he would agree to it. Like, I didn't know that wasn't possible. So it was, right? Because we didn't know that it couldn't be. So I think that was a big part of it, actually. I think there was also a spirit that was beginning to open up there. I think people were tired, people were worn down uh, in all levels of society, and enough information of what they had very idealized versions of the West, right? So I want to just sort of distance myself from the ideology around all of this for a moment because it's not like, oh, this is a perfect system and that was a terrible system or anything. It's all a mess, right? It's all messy. But enough information I think had come to them, uh, through various means, modern media and all of this, that they had this sort of idealized, it was developing an idealized idea of what the West was like. And so we could tap into that a little bit as
Mm,
well. What were their dreams? They knew that their lives had been really difficult. They wanted something better for their children. They wanted something
mm,
better for themselves, right? And so when we understand uh, where someone is aching, where
hmm.
someone feels unfulfilled, where someone feels incomplete, what their dreams are, what their desires are, then we can speak to that, right? And it can be done in a very manipulative way, which, isn't great, but happens all the time. I mean, it's the basis of advertising, right? That's just how it goes. I mean, that is what it is. And it can be done in a more open way, like in what we're doing with our coaching clients, we're inviting them into what it is that they already know that they want or to desire, or what they already know isn't really a fit, but maybe everyone has told them that's the right path to take, or something like that. So helping people to uncover those inconsistencies and those desires, and to tune into how they can make that possible.
And so you came in like we're changing the world and like anything is possible and we're like blowing through the numbers that we expected to have, right? Like you're just on a high kind of, and then describe the reality of the environment you were in and why
Yeah.
it became very high stress, big impact on your nervous system, leading to what you essentially described as burnout, right? Like
Yeah,
your body gave out, your mind gave out, your spirit gave out. You were like you needed that exit ramp, um, almost like a lifeline at that point, right?
very much so. Um, I think the way that it developed, as I couldn't see it then, but looking, it's one of those hindsight
Yeah.
is 2020 sort of situations. Um, I was so aligned with the vision of what we were doing in the work for a number of years. And then in the later years, this is actually a different job, but same location, um, where I was running a pretty large consulting company at that point there. And our clients were these big business people, mostly like Russian oligarchs, we'll call them. They were. And that was a world and the business world uh, in general at that time, sort of late 90s, early 2000s, was really Wild West kind of feeling. There were not a lot of, there was not a great legal framework yet.
Mm.
It was we would joke that it was cheaper to put a contract out on someone than it was to compete, with pricing or advertising or something like that. It was easier just to off the competition.
Oh
And
my gosh.
like some of that happened, right? And uh, some dark ways of doing business and competing and things like this. And there was a lot, even in some of the like World Bank projects and things like that, where there was a good bit of corruption um, locally. And I mean, I would say all of this is really part of it's almost part of the process, right? Nothing is going to happen where it's birthed perfectly, cleanly and smoothly and efficiently or anything like that. But it was a level of stress, um, individually and running that organization there that was very high. There was never an off point, right? Your phones were tapped by your clients, in some cases by my clients' competitors, by the government in some cases. And there was a point where my driver was being paid off to report on a transition from one client to another that we had. People in my office were being paid to report on certain things or to sell a proposal that we had made to somebody. There was never solid ground, right? There was always this sense that you couldn't trust anyone. There was no one to really think things through with, right? Very much like isolated on my own,
Mm.
in this very, highly complex, uh, relatively dark environment. So it was a strain. Plus, I mean, it really was a 24/7 role. You were on call all the time, and there's an 8-hour time difference between where I was working and Washington, where I reported. So you were kind of on both time zones, just all the things. And,
Right.
you're stressed, you're living on caffeine, um, probably not eating very well, which I certainly wasn't at the time, right? So the things that we know now that give a system balance weren't things that I either knew about or that I was paying attention to the way I should have. And so for all those reasons, right? And I didn't have a spiritual life, which I really do think makes a difference. Or that inner base. I didn't have an inner place to go, right? Or an inner core to tap. And that's a liability. It's a liability. Everything is externally based or reflected, and that's a big missing piece, I would argue. So I think that's how it came
Yeah.
apart.
So it sounds like you couldn't trust anybody. You were being watched all the time. You didn't know who was on whose side. And it sounded like it was also a lot of resistance. There were a lot of people that had pain and, saw this as an opportunity to have hope for a better future, but a lot of people that also didn't want change and wanted to protect their current, I assume, way of life.
Or we're
They're,
taking advantage of the opportunity for change, right? Like,
okay.
how do oh, yay, I have an opportunity, and it becomes a sort of hyper competitive,
Uh-huh.
right? I'm not just going to become successful, but I have this opportunity to become exclusively successful, right?
Great.
And then there was that sort of there was a greed drive as well, for sure,
Yeah.
in
And
some circles.
and yeah, and I can imagine just even being in a different country. When you talk about isolation, it's not just you can't trust anybody and you don't know who to trust, but it's also you're assimilating to a completely different language, culture, environment, weather. So nothing is familiar. And if we talk about like your nervous system, that could take a massive like hit on your nervous system because all things unfamiliar feel dangerous and not safe,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely,
And
absolutely.
you talked about I like what you said. You said I didn't have a core or a spiritual life, and that was a liability. Because what you're describing is really the type of life that a lot of entrepreneurs or even startups live, where they feel like very driven by a vision, because that's what it
Yeah.
says. You said you were very committed to a vision, and they are just pushing through 24/7. They're not taking care of their bodies. They are just changing the way things are done. It's either new technology, or they're doing something that is completely against what maybe their circle believes. Maybe not a whole
Mhm.
country, but maybe they are, working against the spouse or the parents or the friends that think that they're crazy, right? Like this is not going to
Absolutely.
work. And they're potentially doing things that they've never really done before,
Yeah.
and hanging on to that possibility, thinking of, what is possible. And in that process, you're saying that not having that inner connection to your spiritual self is a liability. And I like that word, and I want to dig into what made you say that.
Yeah, I think your description of that was, your encapsulation of that was very good. And I think it does relate to high performers of a lot of sorts, and especially people who are striking out and doing something new, which is the case for so many in people in our group. Um, I think it becomes a liability because if I am being called by a vision, and I know that's mine to do, right? And if I'm swimming upstream, or if I'm, bucking the trend, or if I'm, doing the thing that my whole family said is nuts, or whatever it might be, I am on my own in a
Mm-hmm.
sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I am expending energy
Mm-hmm.
constantly when I am not going with the flow, but against it in some way, even though on a bigger scale, I'm going with the vision, which is the bigger flow, if you will, right?
Right.
But to recognize that takes energy. It doesn't feel like it does. But even the fact that we're swimming upstream requires a lot more energy than going with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So an important piece of recognizing that, because uh, we get to become a little more aware of what it is that is going on inside. What are the signals that my mind or my body are sending me that maybe it's time to do something a little bit differently, that um, I get to take a break, that I get to, do something else. So those are easily missed. And if I haven't cultivated an inner sense, if I haven't cultivated an awareness of that core, then I don't hear those signals, right? I don't know, whatever. I get a headache, which I used to get constantly. I lived on Tylenol, literally. I would have like one of those huge jars
Yeah.
of Tylenol on my desk and go through a lot of it um, before I knew all the things that I know now. Uh, but I wasn't aware that that really meant something else. It's not just I have a headache, let me take something, keep going, right? There was a deeper understanding that was available there. So the liability of not having that in our core is hearing, we're not hearing or getting that information that tells us what's going on with our body, with our system, but that also can provide all other kinds of information for us, right? We know, all of us, that sort of sixth sense that happens sometimes when we walk in a room and we just know something's off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I go in and I'm like, ooh, I want to meet this person, right? I heard you
Mm-hmm.
speak and was like, I want to connect with this woman. Um, if I don't have that inner core sort of connected or stabilized, I'm not going to pick up on those things either. And those really can contribute to my high performance. They can
Mm-hmm.
contribute to my seeing an opportunity where I might not otherwise, to knowing whom to maybe avoid or whom to make sure I connect with,
Mhm.
right? And so
Yeah.
there's a world of information that we just our antenna aren't up for it, right? Or back to that camera image, we're not open to it if we aren't if we don't have that core set.
Yeah, what I hear is almost like a paying attention, knowing what to pay attention to. And you said energy too, which also is another of the core, aspects of the CHPC framework. But so many things to talk about because people typically think our energy is just I'm tired and therefore I need to either sleep or, I just have too much on my plate. But there's so much about energy that it's not just physical energy, it's our spiritual energy, it's our mental energy, it's our, relational energy. It's like when you're depleted of all these different energy sources, and there's no creativity. There's no, even if you continue to work all the hours you work, you're no longer as efficient, right? You're no longer as creative.
Sure.
You're no longer as um, just able to create from a centered place of inspiration. You're kind of depleted all those energy sources already. So that is the liability that if you don't recognize when that's happening, right?
Yeah.
It's that you're not able to show up as your best self, I guess. Just
It's
and
mm-hmm.
when you talked about just like knowing I have to talk to that person, right? That knowing I I have to say in my life, I definitely have had lots of moments like that where I don't even think about it. Like it just is this like knowing of I have to, it almost feels impulsive, but it feels inspirational at the same time. Like it feels like a bright, airy, happy thing to do. I don't know how to explain it. And I want to talk to you about it because there's so many times in my life too that I've found myself just very confused. And
Mhm.
it's such a stark difference between what you feel when you're overthinking and researching and questioning and trying to be a very critical thinker about a decision. And you spend time on it and you ruminate and you check again and then you question, was that the right thing? And what did I miss? And I, as a high achiever, type A personality, I make lists and I do pros and cons and I try to find out the information that I don't know. And those are all great things. And yet there's been other times where it seems like a highly, highly critical decision or even a risky decision or a
Mhm.
high stakes decision. And I don't even know how I tapped into it, right? But I just knew, like, yes, this is something I'm going to do. I'm very decisive. I'm very action oriented. I kind of like felt like I had all the information, even though I didn't really do the work to get a lot of information. You know what I mean? And and I found that those decisions have been the most aligned, powerful. Like
Yeah.
I am a social anxiety, like I have a background of a lot of time having social anxiety in my life, like where I would walk into a social situation and I felt like I wanted to run away. I got like my
Mhm.
stomach would get in knots. I would feel like shallow breathing. I like felt like I could die if I didn't like run away. And I had to do a lot of networking and
Mhm.
this was like part of my reality. Like I had to put myself in these situations because they were crucial to my success as just
Yeah.
a product management director in an organization that catered to that client. So I had to be in these rooms. It was the only way that I could start conversations that led to the growth of our business. And there was just frankly, there was a long time that I would just like all right, I get my one drink voucher and I know I'll feel better after that. And we're gonna push through this night. And yet, and I've done so much kind of work to get through that. And like, there's always gonna be moments that it'll come back. But I feel like there's just long periods of time where I'm like, oh my God, I'm cured, right? Like it feels like I've addressed it. And yet, even before I've been able to address it, while I was still this, my identity was this person that was highly anxious in social situations, I would do highly like uh not forward, but like very I guess I could use the word forward. I would be very forward in reaching out to someone that I knew nothing about, that I just would put me in a highly, social place for that would normally be very scary, right? And wouldn't be like me or, a very shy person, whatever. And yet it just felt like the right thing to do. And the thing is, I didn't do it on purpose. Like I didn't say I'm gonna tap into this place to know what to do in this situation. It just kind of like would come to me, like, go talk to this person, reach out to this person. You should have coffee with that person. You should
Yes.
apply to this role. You should suggest that you take on this project. Things that like weren't really part of my personality, I would say.
Hmm.
And I found that when I took those steps, they usually they were like really scary steps, things like move to North Carolina, for example, right? Like,
Right.
but I've gotten to the point where like if when that happens, move to North Carolina, it sounds scary, and yet I've learned that a lot of bad things could happen from these decisions, and they all still lead to like a aligned, like I was meant to be here type of situation, right? It was like a lot of stuff that didn't work out um, led me here, but it was for this other purpose that I was meant to go through. I was meant to meet someone else in this place, like a friend that helped me in this very particular way. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
it's what I want to talk about with you is I can see why it's so important, right? Because I couldn't have possibly known the future, right? Like I didn't know that if I talked
Mm-mm.
to this person, they were going to talk about this project and they were going to, and I was going to somehow be
Yeah.
aligned with that, whatever. And yet I somehow knew I had to talk to them.
Mhm.
And so like no matter how much research you do, no matter, how much you think about it or you ask people or whatever, there's no way for you to really know that.
Yeah.
Like the outcome, which is what we always tie ourselves to. And so one is I don't know how I don't know how I have these moments. Um, I would love to be more intentional about having them,
Yeah.
right? And so how do we do these things? Why is it important for an entrepreneur, a business owner, a high achiever? Why is it that they're missing out on having that kind of decisive knowing of their next steps? And because I also imagine for someone that hasn't experienced this in some level, and maybe everyone has, I'll let you tell me more about that. Um, it must feel scary to go from trying to do everything like in your own will and power and knowing to then trusting something different. And maybe you don't even hear it. Because a lot of times when I am in these ruminating circles, I feel like I can't hear it. Like, why can't this be like that other thing, right? So I'm just so excited to hear your perspective on this and give people some insight on this.
Yeah, wow. Well, you've touched on so many things and opened a really, really large topic. We could do this all day. Um, but you hit some really, really valuable points. And the first one I think I would highlight is that this is available for everyone.
Mhm.
Those moments that you spoke about and that being a more consistent experience is available for anyone. I joke, we jokingly call my father Mr. Spock. Uh, so I was not raised in a, highly intuitive
Mhm.
environment. We were all, linear, play chess, learn the dictionary, like all the very boom, 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 right? And that was great. I'm grateful for that upbringing. And I really sort of say like, if I can develop this or really just open to it, I'm not sure it's even a development. Anyone can, right? I'm like not the there's so many people who are like, oh, I'm all intuitive, but I also, could see the future when I was 10 or something. I like those kinds of stories, right? I'm not that person at all. I'm also quite pragmatic and, quite into the science and the research and all that kind of thing. So I like to have that element as well. But so I would say it's there for everyone, and that it isn't necessarily as weird or as out there as we might think it is, right? It is a capacity that exists within everyone's system. There are studies about the left and right brain and about the capacity of the left brain and how many pieces of information uh, that it can process in a second, and the right brain being, I forget how much, like 10 times, 100 times more than that, an order of magnitude more. So we are more able, both, sort of left brain, right brain, and I know there's some scientific arguments about that. We won't go there. Uh, but also at different brain wave levels, right? So at
Mm.
that normal beta brainwave level, we're able to do X. But when we go into alpha, when we go into theta, the information to which we have access becomes much greater. And I would use a metaphor that our ability to pick up things that might just be as loud as a butterfly's wing at our normal conscious thinking level become much more audible at these deeper levels. Now it's not just the butterfly wing, which in my normal conscious living, I wouldn't even notice it. I wouldn't hear it. But if I'm at an alpha or a theta level, if I'm in a meditative state, if I am quiet at the level of the conscious mind, I am now hearing what in almost every spiritual tradition is called some form of a still small voice, right?
Mm.
And but in a scientific languaging, it is a deeper field of information that I am now attuned to that I can hear better. The volume is turned up on it and turned down on the chatter of the conscious mind, right? So, however we want to look at it, spiritually, scientifically, the answer is the same.
So a lot of spiritual practice like that aren't
Yeah.
religious spiritual practices talk about energy, right? And manifesting. And as a Christian, I always listened to that and it resonated, but I always felt like God moves in energy. Like that the Holy Spirit that lives within us is God's energy within us, and it moves us and it pulls us and it influences us and it speaks to that in us in that still small voice, right? And when we talk about even being in a room with someone, I always say like I'm very like sensitive to people's energy.
Sure.
And I heard you talking about like, the butterfly wing, and I'm like, oh, that's energy. Like if someone has an energy of maybe like their desires, their values, their thoughts, their way of being, like they're emitting a certain energy, then if we hear that butterfly wing, we're drawn to it, I guess. Is that
Yeah.
kind of what you're describing?
I think that that is part of it. Absolutely, right? There's a resonance, there's an awareness of that energy, there's a sense of connection, of possibility, of magnetism. We are electromagnetic beings, right? From a scientific standpoint as well. Uh, And I think there is that draw, right? The from a spiritual standpoint, the energy of the Holy Spirit runs through us all. And I might feel a pull, right, to something, to someone, to a place, to an idea. And when I can listen to that and have that inner core we were talking about of strength to then take the next step, right? To send that email like you were talking about, or to make that phone call, or to walk up to someone we haven't met before. Um, we're listening, right, to that
Mhm.
call.
So what do you think gets in the way of that?
Whew. So many things, way more things get in the way than promote it, right? All I just was listening to something this morning actually that gave data on the number of like ads that we're exposed to in a day now. And it
Ooh.
was some astronomical number. This is the thing about being I don't remember the number, but it's extraordinary. It was like 4,000 or something like this a day, right? A day. And and these days especially, the amount of information we process at any time, right? But in the course of a day, the I mean, the number of emails we get, the number of text messages we get, if you go on social even for 5 minutes, the number of different things that your eyes and that your brain is processing is off the chart and is an order of magnitude beyond anything that has ever been the case in history,
Mhm.
right? We are processing amounts of data that we really aren't designed for, right? We're not designed for. So I would say a key thing that gets in the way is that, right? I'm just being constantly being bombarded by boom, 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 boom. I can't hear.
Mhm.
I don't ever drop out of that rapid beta, right? I'm on, let's go, let's go, let's do, let's do. I never leave that except when I'm asleep, right?
Right.
So I think that's a key thing that gets in the way. Another thing I think is uh, our own beliefs can get in the way,
Mm.
right? That things need to be a certain way, that this is the way things are. Um, our fears of change, our fears of, what if you mentioned something about our personality that you found yourself doing things that just weren't part of your personality. But our personality is itself a little box, right? That we've created on the basis of experiences, fears, traumas, uh, dreams, disappointments, things our parents told us, things our caregivers told us, etc. So the personality itself is like a little construct, right? So as we're doing things beyond that, we're tapping into something bigger. But those beliefs I have about who I am, what can I do, this works like this, it doesn't work like that, those will limit us as well, right?
Mhm.
Um, and definitely will get in the way. And I think also there's a tendency, we've been taught in this society especially that the conscious linear way of going about something, the pros and cons charts you talked about, right? The research that we all do, the matrices of decision making and all that, that's the way to go. That's the highest path. And that's very, very entrenched in our system, right? In our
Mhm.
society. And the idea that I would go with something that I would trust something that just came as a sensation in my body or that
Mm.
came as an idea out of nowhere, moved to North Carolina or whatever it might be, right? That we would go with that and not this
Mhm.
is also something we haven't been taught to trust this. But
Mhm.
neither have we been taught to cultivate it so that it becomes more trustworthy, right? There's a big distinction between like, oh, I feel like ice cream. Let me run to the store and go get a pint of whatever, right?
Right.
That's not my intuition. That is an emotion, which is really different.
Mhm.
It's really different. So, am I experiencing an emotion that's coming up, which could be a result of fear, disappointment,
Mhm.
avoidance, blah, blah, blah? Or am I getting a truer signal, right? That is nudging me somewhere or that is revealing something that I hadn't seen before. So we tend not to trust those things, but we also haven't cultivated or built our muscle to where those things become really trustworthy. It's very easy for people. I see it often with clients who are just getting started, where it's easy to mistake a feeling for intuitive information.
So, how do you cultivate it?
Yeah. Um, the key is to just get quiet. The key
Mhm.
is to get quiet. And and there are so many ways to do that. I was working with someone yesterday who a very high achiever. She's got a big business, multi-country. She's an amazing, amazing woman. And she's like, I've tried every kind of meditation. I've done this and this, right? But even that was like an achievement. I tried this, I did this, I listened to this, I da 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 da, all the different systems, all the different things. I was like, okay, well done, right? Checking everything off the list. But she wasn't in any kind of state where she was really going to be able to get quiet, right? But sitting on a cushion or sitting in a chair or whatever, that wasn't her thing, right? So what we've been doing is getting her out in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And that for her, walking through the trees, being in the forest, listening to the birds, that takes her brain waves, her nervous system state to something different, where she can begin to start hearing, feeling, noticing, listening, trusting in a different way. So we'll each have sort of our own way of cultivating a space of quiet, right? It could
Mm-hmm.
be walking in nature, it could be sitting with any kind of, meditation or um, even a guided meditation or, some of the things that are on like, I don't know, Headspace or Insight Timer, things like this, right?
Calm.
Whatever works, calm, whatever works like that. It can be a certain kind of music, a certain kind of binaural beat, whatever
Right.
works, try stuff, find what works. But the key is going to be how do I slow the system down? How do I move out of that, right, sort of state in the
Survival
mind,
mode.
right, to a calmer, open space? So, any kind of app or meditation practice or quiet walking practice can be helpful with that. Once we do that, once we start sensing, because that's a more bodily awareness that comes there also, right? I'm not just here, I'm aware through the whole body. And that helps bring other levels of knowledge as well, right? I can feel, whew, my stomach is gurgling. Oh, I really feel a lot of tension in those shoulders. Things we're not even always aware of, right? When
Mm-hmm.
we're go, 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 we become aware of, but then we can use the breath, which is another very, very solid method for calming the system, for getting to that inner core, for building an awareness of that solid state internally. So those things that help us get in there and then making a regular practice of it, right, are the things that help us to build it. The same way we go to the gym regularly to get bigger biceps, right? We'll do this regularly to build that inner core. And then in terms of really beginning to trust that information that starts to arise, one of the great uh, things that a teacher shared with me was to start with little things. And, like which orange wants to come home from the grocery with me, or which outfit wants to be worn today. Simple things that don't really matter that much, right? Whether, you chose that gorgeous red top or whether you chose something else isn't going to change the outcome of your life, though I don't know, maybe it will. But,
You know what's
right.
interesting?
Mm.
I do kind of like what, color is calling me today. And for some reason, I was drawn to my green shirt today. And I didn't wear it because I was like, I think I've worn it too many times on camera. But I was like, for some reason, I did feel drawn to my green shirt today. And I was like, I don't know. I think I've recorded with it too many times. I'm just gonna grab the other shirt. But it would have been funny because when I wore that green shirt, the person I had on the podcast also wore a green shirt.
Funny. Right? So
Yeah.
imagine what you might be tuning into or what
Yeah, I don't know.
information you're accessing.
Yeah. It's so interesting. And so it, I had trouble with this and when it was actually presented to be more obviously from a Christian standpoint because I had this like desire to really connect with the Holy Spirit, to really listen, to really hear. And he said similar things like there was a sermon around how do you listen more? How do you allow yourself to be guided by the Holy Spirit? And it was kind of this idea that listen and do the thing that you think it is,
Mm.
and then learn when it is or is it that voice in like kind of a trial and error. And as a high achiever, I was like, you don't want to get it wrong. What if I
Of
listen and it wasn't
course.
it?
Of
Right.
course.
And part of it is like, but I don't hear anything, and that frustration of um doing it wrong, uh, hearing the wrong thing. What if I heard something and then I did it and then it didn't turn out right? Um, how do you and yeah, what you're describing is also like building the habit of getting quiet and how you got to start small and there is that initial frustration of I and I get this from all my like almost all my clients. It's like I've tried meditation. It doesn't work. I can't do it. I don't know how to sit still and quiet, and my brain won't shut off. And I had that recommended to me like probably at least a dozen times before I finally even tried it, right? So talk about maybe that. How do you know it,
Mm.
and how do you kind of work through the beliefs as you're doing it?
That's a great, great question. I think that one of the things that is really helpful is to approach it with curiosity.
Mm,
That's an open way of looking at something, right? It's not like, okay, the outcome is going to be, this, or to have a fixed idea about any of it, but to go in with curiosity. If I'm quiet, what am I noticing? And even the information that comes to us comes in very different ways for different people. My mother gets these visual images in her, in her eye, and it's remarkable. I get none of that. I don't really hear. We're using hear a lot in our conversation together, and a lot of times people will talk about seeing. Oh, I just, I saw this idea. I saw this, picture of this place or whatever. And it can come to us in any number of ways. So to really get comfortable with the different ways our system provides us information, we may see a visual, we may hear something, we may just know, we may get a bubbling up our up our chest or a tingling in our elbow. Like it can come in so many different ways. So the quietness helps us understand what is it? What ways does this information tend to come to me? And that in itself will start building a level of trust, right? Ah, this is that thing that I hear, or this is that kind of visual that I get. So that is one thing. And another, like you were saying, is to just start with small things, right? Start with small things and build and feel into there's sort of this is something I tend to use later on with folks, but it's showing up now, so I'll go with it. Uh, where is this coming from, right? If
hmm
I'm having an emotion, quick go here, quick do this, call this person, cancel this, meeting or whatever it might be,
Right.
that's a different feeling. It's a different sensation. It's a different awareness. It's going to have a different sound or visual, a different frequency if you're thinking in that way, than a clear knowing, right?
Yeah.
This is the thing to do. And when I can start noticing those distinctions, this is that fear piece coming up, right? I get that impulse, call this person And then the part of me that's scared says, that's really not a good idea, blah, 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 right?
When you say
Yes.
that's really not a good idea, I notice that um, if it's fast, it's fear. If it's like all of a sudden the thoughts are coming fast and there's a lot of chatter
Hmm.
around it, it's usually not like a knowing, it's usually fear. It's not like my intuition, it's usually fear. If it's more calm and like grounded, it's like it could be sad, but it's not fast. It's not like and this and that and don't do it. And it's more like this is not gonna work. You know what I mean? It's like very like just I know,
So
right?
that is great noticing, right? And you're cultivating exactly that. You're like, if it's fast, I got to check on that, right? That's
Yeah.
probably not good. That's probably fear. So just learning those things like, and there is something really to be said for what you just shared, which is that if it is truth, if it is a real intuitive sense that has a deeper meaning, or that is the voice of the Holy Spirit, or what have you, it's not going to be shocking. It's not going to scare us. It's not going
Hmm.
to, uh, it's going to be calm, right? We may not like what it has to say sometimes, right? It may be a hard truth that we're being shown, uh, but there's a calmness to it, and that is almost always the case.
So I want to touch on your spiritual journey because you said you
Yeah.
came from a highly religious um, environment and that you rejected it in a big
Yeah.
way, like you wanted nothing to do with it. And as I'm listening to you, also the thing that comes to mind is like there will be people, I'm sure, that are just speculating about what we're talking about and saying things like, well, you're assigning these things meaning, right? And you're giving it a label, but that doesn't make it true, right?
Mhm.
Like we're saying, this is the Holy Spirit speaking to me. And that also, for myself, became a knowing in that there's just no way like I could have orchestrated the things that have happened in my life. You know what I mean? Like the things that played out in my life, the way I found myself in different spaces at different times with different people that opened up different opportunities, even the bad ones, to work out in this like perfectly crafted painting, you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
of a situation to all work together for my good in that way. Like I didn't do that. My neighbor didn't, you know, my parents didn't do that. My
Right.
neighbor didn't do that. Like there is somebody that is like really making this happen. And so when I'm called, like I feel called to do something, I know that when it works in that way, it's not from me, it's from the Holy Spirit. And therefore, out of gratitude and out of um, just like this desire to connect. It's almost like a relationship, right, with that entity that has that for me. I want to listen more and I want to speak more and connect more with the Holy Spirit. And yet I want to hear, since you were so rejecting of religion and those concepts, like what did that journey look like? And what do you think for those that are speculating? You know, maybe you're just assigning meaning, or is it really that or not? Like, what would you say to them? But
So, it has been a very interesting journey. And I was, raised in with a very specific framework of understanding that I did reject. And that I went as I began a spiritual path anew as an adult and after my sort of breakdown, if you will. That took me a lot of places, and I've lived in a lot of countries, experienced a lot of cultures, um, people of different faiths, all of this. And so I have a very broad acceptance and a broad understanding of a lot of different ways of looking at the world, including the scientific one, which, could almost be called a religion in some ways, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I'm in a space where I feel like I can see, accept, hold all of that. And I have clients who are, every different religion, who are all science, who are all woo, who are, all across the map. And I love being able to serve all of them from where they are. And one of the things that I find striking is people will use different words, different frames, different ways of understanding, just based on their tradition, based on their experience, based on their trauma in some cases,
Mhm.
based on their faith. And we'll see these experiences or will interpret this information in the way that their system is able to process it, right? Based on all of these different factors. And so I have fun with it because whether, I'm talking to someone who's an engineer who's like, oh, well, the neuroscience says da 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 da, and therefore we're, processing X and finding out Y. And they're taking all of this and they're on board with it. They're using it, but they're looking at it and assigning meaning from a very materialistic perspective. Great, right? And for someone who has a relationship with the Holy Spirit, who has those experiences and those teachings to draw on, that has a very different meaning, right? And that awareness then informs the experience, and naturally we want more of that. So I think I think there are, I don't even know what to say. There are many different ways that people experience this and different meanings that people will give it based on their experience in life. And no matter what it the thing is the thing. It is the same, uh, or I understand it to be the same. Um, no matter what our background might give us as a way of understanding it.
Yeah, I saw like a meme, I guess you would call it, that said something like, the Christians call it the Holy Spirit, the I guess scientists call it energy, um I forget what, like all these different um
Yes.
like belief systems, and it talked about what label they give it, like, they the what's now called, spiritual people call it the universe, but we're all not arguing, we're all in agreement that it's out there, and it's all working in the same ways. And so to have us all just use different terminology is, like you said, it's just the context that we're operating under, I guess.
I think it is, I think it is. Um, and what's beautiful is our ability to have a conversation, right, with whomever, right?
Yeah.
You with someone who's from a very different background or someone who's an engineer, and I don't not to say anything bad about engineers, but who's totally on like the science side, right? And the fact that we can share that experience and open to one another at that level, in spite of the fact that, I speak this language and someone else speaks this other language.
Yeah. I mean, I guess as a Christian, I believe that once you've tapped into that, the Holy Spirit will always kind of call you home, right? Like
Yes.
if you are tapped into it, I believe that you will always find your way back to the Holy Spirit. And maybe that has something to do with your journey, because we didn't get there yet. So tell us, like, how that journey went from just like rejecting it and then finding yourself back um,
Yeah.
at church,
I
I guess.
the I right? I think the short answer would be that I had exposure to traditions, ideas, and teachings that were different than than what I had grown up with. And even then, when I rejected, I was more rejecting the institution.
Hmm.
I was having
Yeah.
more issues with the institution than the
Right.
teachings themselves. But I didn't recognize fully that that distinction existed, right? I was young and only so aware.
Right.
And so as I became exposed, I began with the Vedic path, with Buddhism then. And as I learned these different traditions, and certainly I'm not going to claim to be, an expert in anything. Uh, but as I studied, in India, as I studied with different teachers and really took on um, some of these deeper practices, I was able to have experiences and to understand things that I hadn't before.
Mm.
And I recognized through experience
Yeah.
that there's an awareness, there's a truth, there's a presence, there's a beingness that feels the same regardless of the way a tradition talks about it, or even in the consciousness studies that I've been part of, that even from a scientific or more linear perspective, the experience is the same.
Mhm.
And at that, as that was occurring, I don't even remember how it first began, but somehow through someone, I got turned on to some of the Catholic mystics.
Hmm.
And through the reading and the study of some of their works, that really brought me to a deeper understanding of some of the teachings of the tradition I was raised in, which is now clear as Catholicism. Um, and that it's like I met it again at a different level.
Mm.
And wow, there was a quote I heard just the other day about something like this that now I'm not quite putting my finger on. But to come back to the same place you were and see it anew.
Hmm.
And that has been my experience. Um, I still have issues with institutions. I still have issues with, blah, blah, blah. And there's a deeper level of understanding that I came to through my own experience in traveling, uh, physically and metaphorically, um, and through those experiences, and from that place, seeing and encountering these teachings and the experiences that go with them in a very different way, from a different
Yeah.
place.
Yeah. Like two things I heard that like definitely resonate with me is the first one is like you talked about how trauma influences how you think about spirituality. And so many people do have childhood trauma, whether it be big trauma or even little trauma. Like I was not, I was told what to do. I had no control and I couldn't do anything about it. And I didn't know why. And that was just the way it was because the institution told me. And that as a child becomes really like super overwhelming for a child's nervous system. There's trauma
Definitely.
behind it and they associate it with the religion. And that's really the institution, the person that's the real key, right? Like the institutions are run by human beings and human beings are flawed. And like the problem is
Absolutely.
not God, the problem is people, right?
Yeah.
And so that like really resonated with me. And then the other aspect of what you were saying is like what the believers, like a true believer, the majority that are like in that space is because they had an experience, not because somebody told them to, not because they grew up that way. Like they had an experience that they couldn't deny. And you put yourself in spaces where you could have those experiences. And not only that, you were seeking. And as scripture says, you should, if you seek, you will find. And so you almost have to be open, right, to the possibility that there could be an experience for you. And when
Yes.
you have that experience, like it's undeniable, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
And you know, um, when we're talking about these things,
Mhm.
it's really about for me, because we're talking about it in as it relates to high performance and entrepreneurship, and we're talking about, businesses, and it sounds like very woo-woo, but at the end of the day, like I think what it connects to is our purpose, right? Like why are we even doing all these things? Why are we struggling? Why are we hustling? Why are we trying to meet goals and all this stuff? And I thought you had a beautiful purpose statement. I want you to share it. And then I want to talk about how do you connect with purpose, and how does spirituality inform, I guess, our purpose, and why is it so important?
Well, that's just a little easy question.
Yes.
I'll take 20 seconds. Um, I think this all connects to purpose. I think purpose in that grand sense actually is one of the greatest questions for humanity. I mean, every endeavor in some way is connected to why are we here, right? Why are we here? What are we here for? What is this about? And those questions have driven philosophy, literature, spirituality. They drive, I mean, you can argue that in so many ways they're driving technology at this point, right? And the advances and discoveries in technology. So that fundamental question of purpose, I think, is so deeply present and so interwoven into everything. On a more personal level, why am I doing the things I'm doing, right? Why um, my sense of my purpose is that I get to, for myself and for others, awaken us to the light that we can be in the world.
Yeah.
And that uh, I was shown an image one time when I was studying in India, actually. Uh, and I was thinking about what I wanted to do career-wise, right? I had left my corporate position already and was thinking of opening a healing practice, was thinking about other consulting work. I didn't know where to go. And I was in meditation and I saw this picture of myself bagging groceries, like for a job, right? I'm at a
Right.
grocery store, I'm bagging groceries.
Okay. Yeah.
I was shown another picture of myself as president of the United States. I was shown another picture of myself with a healing practice and, helping people in a day-to-day world. And then I was told they're all the same. It's all the same because it was about who am I being, right? What is coming through and who am I being more than about the job. That whatever the job, the expression is what matters. That is the purpose. And that was astounding to me. That was a earthquake in my system because my whole identity had been tied up in what I do and my role and my title and in the excitement of, oh yeah, I'm the jet-setting international business consultant, right? Like that's a cool identity. Why would I let that go, right? That was fun. But to understand that it stripped that away, right? And that the purpose isn't the job. The job is one more way through which we express the purpose, right? So is one's family, so are one's friendships, so is one's spiritual or religious life. All of these things are ways that we express that purpose. So that was a huge shift for me. And I think is for a lot of us, as high performers, we
Hmm.
identify as that or we
Hmm.
identify with the company that we founded, with the team that we lead, whatever that might, with the family that we run, right? We identify as that. So I think one thing about purpose is that it isn't that, it comes through that, but it isn't about that, right?
Yeah.
And
It's
and I
good.
do think it can evolve, right? I don't know that the purpose itself really evolves, but our understanding of it,
Hmm.
how open am I to the capacity of it? I think that evolves. So our sense of purpose may evolve over time as well, and I think that's probably normal. And I've even lost the rest of your question.
That's okay. Um, I guess I don't remember the exact question, but I think where that takes us is like, why is that important? Like, why is it important that we have purpose? And what happens when you don't? And
Mhm.
when you are just goal oriented and you kind of just say, um, like you just kind of go through the motions of life.
So I mean, I think you're revealing it even in the way that you state the question, right? Like we're drawn by our purpose or we're just going through the motions. I know for myself, I realize now I had lost a deeper sense of purpose, and I think that is what left me so empty um, at the time
Mm-hmm.
that that occurred for me. And I think what I've seen sometimes with clients is the goal will take us just so far
Mm-hmm.
even if it's a huge, the big, hairy,
Mm-hmm.
audacious goal, no matter how big that goal is, the goal itself only takes us so far, right? The purpose may be the fuel that allows that to occur. It may be the the greater driver that makes it even, better, or that allows us to really, connect fully with it, or to preserve ourselves as we're giving everything for that project or that goal or whatever it is we're creating. And I think the purpose is probably what I'm going to say it's what keeps our direction clear. And I think it's probably a lot of what keeps a renewable fuel source.
Yeah. Yeah. When you say it keeps our direction clear, that to me also says like what keeps us and the fuel, what keeps us going when it gets hard, because there's something much greater value um, to us than just the goal, right?
Yes. I think
So,
there's a place also where it can keep us open to possibilities that we may not otherwise see. Right? If I'm
well,
solely focused on the goal, I'm not seeing anything but that, right? I'm seeing that bullseye on the target or whatever, and that's it. But if I'm really tuned into purpose, that's expanding my vision, and I've got that goal. I'm still right there with it, but I might see these other things that could be opportunities, possibilities, partners, whatever that I wouldn't be able to see otherwise.
yeah. Yeah, and that goes back to being in tune, right? Being connected, because then you feel led to something.
Yeah.
And you open your mind up to it could be something totally different from what I thought would be the best thing. Like sometimes we think we are setting big, audacious goals, and if we're connected to a higher power that all th makes all things possible, you know, their plan for us is 100 times bigger than
Yes,
what we think is our big, hairy, audacious goal. Um,
absolutely.
and so, how do you connect with purpose, or how do you seek out purpose? Or for you, it sounds like you kind of saw like these pictures in your mind that spoke to you in a way that said, "Oh, wait, what I'm meant to do is anywhere." But how did you know what you're meant to do, and how do you help people connect with that or find that
Yeah.
um, or even know that they want that, I guess. Like,
Mm. And I think I'm going to start from the end, which is knowing that we want that. And normally, when people are coming to me, something's off. If
hmm
everything was perfect, I wouldn't get the phone call,
yeah.
right? Something's off. And a lot of times it is that uh, like purpose is a starting point to so many things. That a lot of times it's that center we come back to, right? And so knowing that
Yeah.
puts everything else in perspective. Why am I doing this or this or this or this or this? This gives me the reason why,
hmm
right?
hmm
This gives me the understanding of why am I making this effort? Why am I not choosing to do this? Why does this feel icky, but this feels great?
hmm
Um, And I think there's a framing that can happen when we understand purpose. I think going inside is the best way to connect with it. Um, there are schools of thought that we get to determine a purpose, like I'm going to decide what my purpose is and go
Hmm.
with it. There are
Hmm.
other schools of thought that it is there in existence already for us to become aware of or to uncover. I think
Hmm.
either can work, right? I think, again, it
Hmm.
partly depends on how a person's mind works and what they're open to. If someone has no experience of going inside and uncovering something and already in existence, they're not likely to do it, right?
Right.
It's not going to happen. I haven't learned how to pole vault, so I'm not going to go that
Mhm.
route, right?
Right.
Um, but I think either way, we can create that deep connection to it, which is what do I feel most, aligned with? What do I feel most strongly about? I mean, there's so many exercises that you can do, and again, the ones I use with people vary depending on the person and their own ways of engaging and seeing the things. But you can
Yeah.
look at, the sort of confluence of what do I love? What
Hmm.
would I do anything for? Right?
Hmm.
What would be that most valuable thing? I would do anything for this. Um, where do I feel I have something to give? There's a way for me to
Hmm.
serve. Um, and what do I feel I have something, I have a skill, I have a gift, I have a contribution where I can make, which often can come out of our own process, right? If you had asked me 30 years ago, my purpose, it certainly would not have been to help people awaken to the light they can be in the world. I didn't have any concept of that, right? It wasn't, I didn't, nor had I needed to do that exploration for myself, right? Once that occurred, then it's like, oh, well, clearly this is the thing to do, right? There's no, or this is just who I am. This is this is how I show up in the world now. Okay, great. So I think there are different ways that we can explore it, but I think ultimately it's that sort of confluence of uh, what is in me that gets to express how do I serve and what do I love?
Yeah. Absolutely. I know going through the motions of life, that's kind of the point that I had hit where I was like, I just feel like there's got to be more to life than this. Like I feel like there was like I think the biggest pain point for me was a misalignment in values, right? Like I was in spaces where I believed people should be treated in a certain way and they were being treated differently, or I believed that um, in a strong message about like female empowerment and loving yourself as you are, and the products that were being promoted were about finding your flaws and fixing them to feel better, right? And then
Yeah.
I believed that family was the most important, and yet I found myself not spending as much quality time with my family because even the time I was spending, I wasn't mentally, spiritually, emotionally there.
Yeah.
Um, and so there was a misalignment in values there that made me feel like I was just kind of like, um, what's that called? Like checked out of my life. Like just
Yeah.
kind of like doing the things, but not finding joy or for fulfillment in them. Um,
Yes.
and and then there was, okay, well, how do I find purpose? Because I felt like purpose equaled fulfillment. Um,
Mm.
and I found that the only thing that resonated for me during that time where I was trying to um, connect with that was, yes, a lot of introspective thinking, right? It did start with a lot of, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And it was frustrating that I
Yeah.
didn't know. And then it was a lot of like, what were the moments in your life where you felt, so full of joy and peace, or just a sense of like everything was give you greater hope and seeing the goodness of the world, right? Like,
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
and so there was a lot of that, a lot of like journaling, but also like anytime I felt called to do something, like this is piquing my interest or it feels good to think that I could be a part of it. Um, it feels, when I say good, I'm talking about like it feels like I'm doing good, like I am making a difference in some way. That would, and I think that's to me what I relate purpose to is like, how am I making a difference in this space that I find myself in? What's the difference that I'm making? And how am I uniquely equipped to make that difference, I guess?
Yes.
And then I would try it, and I had to eventually know when it was time to like move on from it. Like, okay, I
Mm.
guess that didn't work, or that wasn't what I thought it was going to be, or so I started an e-commerce business that
Uh-huh.
had positive messaging on it because I wanted to inspire and motivate and empower. And I thought that was the avenue I was going to do it in, but I realized a lot of that meant I had to be manufacturing or sourcing things like jewelry and shirts and journals. And I was more passionate, like I had more energy, right? We talk about energy behind the message and what the the like empowerment was going to be than
Yes.
the core of what I was going to have to do, which is source these products, materials, and all of that.
Yes.
And so, like, that would be an example of a time where it really takes exploration, like you said. And I wonder, like, that curiosity. I wonder what would happen if I tried that, or I wonder what would happen if, I listened this time, or, you know. And so I think when we talk about that meaning, I don't know. Maybe if there's research on this, but can we get through this life without meaning, right? I mean, when we talk about like people that are atheists and um, just think that we come, we live, and we die, what does that do to someone's, I guess, psychology, someone's lifestyle, and by contrast, what happens when you do live centered in purpose and seeking connection to your spirituality?
Hmm. So it's a fascinating question. And I think that to go to your original portion of that question, how can we live without meaning? And I think the answer to that is probably no, right? I mean, I don't think it would be possible because we're meaning making
Hmm.
machines, right? As humans. Everything we're doing is creating meaning around something. Everything I look at, everything I touch, everything, I mean, physiologically, we are set to give meaning to all of these different things from a survival standpoint, right? I know if there's
Hmm.
a car coming in a certain direction, I'm giving that a danger meaning. If it's going in an
Mhm.
opposite direction, there's a different meaning that I've given it. So even from a biological standpoint, we're always giving meaning. Whether someone has either through their upbringing or through their experience or whatever, had a framework for spiritual meaning or for religious meaning, that's a framework of meaning, right, in existence through which we can think and operate and experience. But I don't know, like the folks I know who I know plenty of people who are atheists, and I don't know that that means that that someone's devoid of meaning, right? It's a different kind of meaning. There could be a deep philosophical meaning. There could be a deep meaning of service. There could be like I don't know that those two are mutually exclusive, right?
Mm.
But I don't think that we go very far, and I certainly don't think we experience fulfillment without a deep sense of meaning. whatever
Right.
meaning that might be.
Right. Right. Yeah. I would agree with you. And that that's true. Like if you that's probably when you kind of lose your will to keep going, right? Without meaning, what is why continue?
Absolutely, right? Why? Why? And I think meaning and purpose can end up fairly tightly connected. And
Hmm.
there may be some semantic questions there too, even of what, how they relate to one another. Um, but I know in my own experience, when I had hit rock bottom, that was a crisis of meaning and a crisis of purpose. No question.
So I love I love what we're talking about because like one thing you said to me when we talked about getting on the podcast was like this is gonna be the next wave of
Yeah.
you say it.
Well, my sense is that uh, developing this inner core, developing this deeper awareness, accessing these greater fields of really good information and of opportunity, of synchronicity, etc. I think that muscle, right? The development of that muscle is going to be sort of the next superpower. Is kind of the word I'm using right now. The same way, right? I liken it to the way, I don't know, I'm going to age myself here. Like in the 80s, right? Ooh, exercise was the cutting edge thing, right? If whatever, do running twice a week or something, you're going to be more successful and do better in your business and all this. And then nutrition was the next thing. And now, all the biohacking and all this. But I really do think like this next cutting edge is that inner work, is that inner core, understanding, accessing, and operating from there.
Yeah, I think it's just like even as you described it, right? How um, people or humans are progressing and evolving and growing um, through the years as we become more efficient and more, seeking out being more productive and, having more
Hmm.
success and whatever else. We're finding that through the evolution of humanity, right? That we went from this completely logical place, and the more we evolve and grow and learn, we're finding that the more connected that we are to our selves and our our spirituality, that's really what's making the differentiation. Because even just exercise is already connecting to our bodies for the first time, in a different
Yeah.
way, moving energy through our bodies like we weren't doing for a long time. And I think yeah, we're not machines. We're human beings. Yep.
I think that's really, really true. There have been some interesting writings in the relatively recent past about how humanity used to be much more aware of all of this, right? And we lived from a much more balanced understanding, from a broader base of awareness. And then we shut it down and everything became, rational and scientific and all of that. And we basically just, we kind of turned off this one faucet, right? If we have hot and cold water, we turned one off and we've just got the other right now. And our fullest expression is really when we bring the whole thing together,
Right.
when we are coming from our wholeness and not from just a part.
Right. Actually, in that process of looking for purpose and my next phase of my career, one of the things that I did is I became certified as a doula. So
Wow.
I sought out my doula certification, and it was again like when you zoom out and you look at your journey, you can kind of see the patterns, and that is when
Absolutely.
it became so clear to me, right? What the purpose was behind all these different things, like what moved me, what motivated
Wow.
it, and it was about empowerment, right? And supporting someone towards like a meaningful goal. right? And that
Yes.
was like bringing life into the world. I thought that when I gave birth at home in a pool.
Oh,
And it was a water birth with a doula. I'm sorry, not a doula, a midwife. I had midwives. And I just found it such a like life-altering experience, and I wanted everybody to have it. But when I think about just the way we've evolved, right? And you think about birth and how it was very like natural. You're meant to do this, follow your intuition. Your body knows how to give birth. It's like made for this, and you connect to your higher self, and you know that it's connected to life, which is connected to, source, which is God. And it's like this beautiful experience, and you're in it. And then um, medicine came to be, and then all of a sudden, birth was almost treated like it was like a disease, and you had to
absolutely.
cure it. And so when I think about uh like spirituality, or when I think about our emotions, right? Like energy, emotions, I feel like it's a similar, like I have a therapist that explained it to me in this way. And I was like, that makes so much sense. It's just like my experience with understanding how to, because I was also a childbirth educator, how to explain it to them
Amazing.
is that your body on a daily basis needs to like you trust that your body is you're going to eat nutrition, and you're going to have to forgive the reference, but excrete the waste, and
Right?
you're just meant to do this, and you don't question it, you don't do, you were built to do it the same way that you have a pregnancy, and now your body is meant to birth that pregnancy, and it knows how to do it, and you don't question it, you listen to it, right? And then we tried to cure it. Our emotions and our energy, the way that we process that went from being very like normal to scream, to cry, to dance,
Yes.
in this like
Yes.
very connected way, to now, you have to be embarrassed. You're shamed and embarrassed for doing anything that's not normal. And then it was treated as like a disease again. Like
Mm-hmm.
you cry too much, if you scream too much, if you jump around or dance in weird ways because it's different, then then you're bad, you're wrong, you have to be treated for it. And not that meant that people then were no longer allowed to like express and connect with
Yes.
those parts of themselves where they can listen to what their body needs or wants to express and let
Absolutely.
out and move out of their bodies. And now we're going back to, again, like connect with your body, listen to what it's telling you,
Definitely.
move it through. You were designed to be able to process these emotions, to be able to process the energy that is moving through you, through tears, through jumping, through dancing. Um,
Yes.
and, and I think the same way, you talk about like the business world is this, that similar thing is like, we weren't from like CEOs work all the time, do all the charts, because those crazy emotional people that were just making random decisions, it didn't feel like that, felt like it was wrong. So then it's ultra structured, ultra based on, because I guess computers came around, right? And so you needed to be fix this erratic stuff and make it more predictable with computers. And now we're again becoming enlightened that that's not how we tap into the most of who we are. We're meant to be connected in this way, not just to ourselves, but to others,
Yeah.
um, right? In this depth. Because, yeah, I think that's what we're talking about. It's like we're much
You know,
deeper.
I think it is. I think we're more, you know.
Mhm.
And as you were, speaking about, we were over here, we went over here. I'm thinking about, how that pendulum swings and that nothing is wrong. Evolution happens in cycles.
Mhm.
And so it's natural. We might go like, oh, I mean, the rational mind is wonderful. science is amazing, right? We're able to do all sorts of things that
Yeah.
we would never have been able to do otherwise. So there's no like, oh, this is wrong or but, we go to a point where we're like, oh, wait, this is awesome, but we've left something behind. We've lost
Right.
something, right? So we re-engage that piece we've lost. Even then, we're doing it at another level, right? If you think in terms of spiral dynamics or Ken Wilber's work, we're on an upward spiral
Yeah.
in our evolution. And so even though we lose something and we get to bring it back in, we're bringing it in at a higher level, right? In a
Yeah.
wiser way with
With
a
more
greater
awareness.
capacity, greater awareness or wholeness. And I think it will always be that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Catherine, this has been like, we always love to talk about it, and we could probably do this all day. But I think we covered so much, and it is a lot
Yeah,
to kind of digest and like incorporate into our lives. Like, how are we tapping into our inner knowing more? How are we letting that not just be, not just let God into our homes,
mm,
but our businesses and our way of leading people on our teams. And it is about that invitation to tap deeper and know that meaning for ourselves so that we can be more driven from a very bright, purposeful, shining, guiding light, as opposed to just going through the motions, just hitting the goals and then finding that they're empty. I think that's so
definitely. That's
important.
very common these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so, Catherine, you mentioned you're an executive coach.
Mhm.
If anybody wants to kind of do more of this work and get in touch with you, why don't you tell us about how you work with people and how they might connect with you?
Yeah, great. So my website is just my name, katherinekrupka.com. So easy enough to find. And I like to work with people a bunch of different ways. I'm so hyper individualized, partly because I've got people from so many different walks of life who come to me for such a variety of reasons. But I love working with people really to do exactly what we're talking about, which is how do we build more of that inner core? How do we access that even greater awareness, that greater intelligence, and bring that to all areas of our lives? I love working with people, bringing something new to their businesses, but really it's wherever in our lives where we know there's room for more wholeness, more meaning, more purpose.
Thanks so much, Catherine. I love today's conversation. I thank you so much for your time and sharing your light with the rest of our audience here.
You are so kind. It is an absolute joy. I'm so happy we've connected, and I'm so grateful to you I'm so amazed by what you're doing. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Catherine. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Courage and Purpose. I hope today's insights inspired you to take bold action and align your life and career with what truly matters to you. If you're ready to dive deeper, I invite you to download my free Action Indicator assessment, a powerful tool to help you uncover what's holding you back and take the next step towards clarity and confidence. Just visit www.lifeonpurpose.coach/action indicator to get started today. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with someone who could use a little extra courage on their journey. Until next time, stay true to your purpose, lead with courage, and keep thriving. I'll see you in the next episode.